My name is Kathy Mayer, and I have been a weaver and a member of the Weavers Guild of Minnesota for a bit over 20 years now. Man, that time has flown. So I have been involved with what was called Fiber Fair for a number of years, including as an exhibitor. So let me move along, just so you know who's on this end of the microphone. I'm going to move along now to our first slide, which is about something that I've had so many questions about. We do have a go, no-go decision scheduled for July 15th on whether to proceed with the fall sale as we have re-envisioned it based upon the COVID-19 considerations. So I just heard back from the state fair again yesterday. They have not finished coming up with their regulations for rented venues or rented buildings, but they are doing those regulations based on type of event and have determined that we fall in the retail category for whatever that means. The next thing we're looking at is the Minnesota Department of Health and the CDC guidelines and forecasts, which you have access to as well, obviously. But right now, we are in what I've heard described as the upward stroke of the square root sign, where it goes up, then back down, then back up higher before it levels off. So we have not hit peak yet. The next thing that we have to really take into consideration is we have to have members willing to work the sales floor during the sale. And depending on the length of the shifts that we do, that could be 20 to 40 people a day. And I am starting to hear from people who have been working on this committee as well as doing some other work for this committee saying, you know what, I'm not willing to expose myself to the general public that way. And I have to say, many of us know that a lot of the exhibitors are, like me, of a certain age. So I would have difficulty doing it myself at this moment. Redesigning the sales floor to allow for social distancing, one-way foot traffic and all of that is actually pretty easy. It does put a little bit of a crimp in our display plans in terms of how much we can display if we have to social distance. And then the other big one that I personally have difficulty with is how to disinfect any items tried on by customers. So I do some Zephyr or silk and wool capes or large scarves, and I would not want anybody spraying disinfectant on those. I just wouldn't. So those are difficult. We met as a committee last week, and what we decided is that we are a no-go for 2020. We cannot figure out how to get past these things and have a successful sale. It's not just about having the event, it's about having a successful sale. So I know all of you did not tune in specifically to say, whoop, we were just kidding. You weren't expecting to hear a no-go, but when we talked about it last week, we thought, we really think we're going to call it a no-go anyway. Why wouldn't we share that with everybody that we're talking with tonight? So here's what I'd suggest we do for just a second. So what now? There's a reason you should stay with us for the rest of the discussion tonight, because we want to talk about what the spring 2021 sale will look like, which is April 30th and May 1st. We already had reserved that date with the state fair. In the event, we had to call this a no-go. We are evaluating an online sale, which we want to talk with you about tonight. And that would tentatively run from October 16th through December. Then lastly, we would still have next year in 2021, we would still have a fall sale, a spring sale and a fall sale, provided it's safe to do so. So with that, I'm just going to say stop, take a breath, I know we've been living and breathing it day in, day out for 18 months. So it's not a shock to some of us, but I'm sure it is a shock to some people. So if you have questions, now is the time to use your chat window.
I'm not seeing any questions right now, Kathy, but I think we can give it a second in case anybody wants to put a question into the chat.
Okay, then I'm going to move right along. So what will we look like when we have the next in-person sale? Which is where we plan to start our whole discussion tonight. You might notice this is a photo from the 2018 sale. I've managed to incorporate several of those in this discussion. So here we are. You, meaning members, patrons, asked us to make changes. And the way you did that, I get a chuckle out of every time I think about it, because there's nobody but a fiber person. And that includes my guild up here in the North Country, the guild I was part of in New Mexico. There's nobody like weavers, spinners, and dyers that are as direct and is willing to share their opinion to anybody who wants to listen at any moment in time. So in this case, we thank you for that. We went through a number of surveys. We got a ton of direct feedback. We had focus groups. We also had feedback from the chairs of what was Fiber Fair for the last 5 or 6 years with their recommendations. But that netted us a total of 23 pages, single-spaced, of feedback, which was awesome, just awesome. So then this was last November. So December of 2018, 18 months ago, the Re-envisioning Committee was formed. And these are the members of the committee that have been working on this on our behalf for the last 18 months. So I would say thanks so much for all the time that you guys have put in. It's been literally hundreds and hundreds of hours. So with that, I'm going to move on to what changes did you ask us to make? So this is called a short list. It's not really very short. But as we go through these slides, I'm not going to drain every slide. There's a lot of detail on some of them. Do feel free to go look at this presentation online or look at the recording online at some future point. But I want to call out a few things. We know that our marketplace out there has become very, very competitive. Makers markets have saturated the environment, especially around the holidays. So there's a lot of competition out there. We also know that we don't have enough volunteers. And that means for the committees, and it means for actually holding the show. This is an event that's by the members and for the members. So we are the ones that have to put this on. We have declining participation from year on year. But yet, we have too much to display adequately. We've had some beautiful works that just got lost under piles of inventory, which is a wonderful thing to have that much inventory, beautiful things from our members. But we knew we had to find some answers to the space problem and the display problem. One other thing, and this came through in a number of comments from you all, actually, as well as some of the customers that were there for the 2018 event. And I happened to be able to hear firsthand that we were starting to look crafty. Our repurposed items that were coming into the show, as well as some others, weren't doing us any favors in terms of what they had come to expect as the style and characteristics of our event. Which in their words were they essentially expect us to present quality goods for sale that represent our mission, which is weaving and spinning and dyeing. So other than the new venue and the name change, we sat back and we said, okay, who do we think our target market is? And based upon who that is, what should we do with marketing? Because there were a ton of comments that said, we need more marketing, more marketing, more marketing, get more people through here. Well, who are we marketing to is the big question. And then the starting to look crafty comments we were getting, we had to step back and say, what categories of things are we actually showing? And the record keeping lent itself to dealing with all but about 20% of things that were sold, which got categorized as miscellaneous. So we said, do we broaden our offerings and add categories and become a different kind of sale? Or do we focus our offerings, narrow it down into be best in these specific categories in the overall Twin Cities market, which is eventually what we decided to do. So these are the factors that we were looking to address, and we've been working on and continue to work on. So from there, we said, okay, we need some guiding principles essentially for how we go about this. So we said, let's look to our mission, which is preserving and advancing the arts of weaving, spinning, and dyeing. We also had to say, the new name lets potential customers know exactly what we're about. We do plied things or spun, we do dyed things, and we do woven things. And Artisan Sale says that we are the artisans, and we ought to be representing ourselves that way. We are highly skilled in these spaces at all levels of our practice. And one of the members of our committee said, darn it, we have got to say this is a sale. We're trying to sell things here, not just do an exhibit. So that's what we took into account in terms of naming. But this also gave us the bumpers, if you will, or the guiding principles about how we made our decisions. So what did we change? And this, by the way, is Kayla in a photo of the new space. I mean, look how open that is, how the lighting is fabulous. We changed the name, the Weavers Guild of Minnesota Artisan Sale, Plied, Dyed, and Woven. And that's how it will be advertised. We also pulled the date up out of November because we've had so many sales that have been impacted by a snowstorm in mid-November for at least a day. 2018 was no different. I think sales were about half of what we've expected. We compressed the sale to 2 days. A lot of feedback about why do we continue on Sunday? We don't sell much of anything, and that's true. We don't. The largest portion of the foot traffic on Sunday is actually our own members waiting to pick their things up at the end of the show. All right, so our new venue, you've seen the face of that, the State Fair History and Heritage Center. And we have restructured the categories of goods that we sell, focusing on hand spun, hand dyed, and hand woven, which means we have eliminated some categories, which we will cover a little bit later. And I want to show this because it's a perfect example of how this committee has gone about addressing every one of these changes. So this is what we went through when we decided on a new venue. We looked at 22 different venues. That means this group of people went out and looked at 22 different places that we might hold this sale. There were 4 finalists, and what you see here is a snapshot of the whiteboard at the Guild that we used at the time to say, here are all of our selection criteria, basically from most important to least important. And this is the House Hunters style review where we either X'd it off because it's too expensive, we simply cannot do it, or it works for us. Now the affordable one, the price one, turned out to be a real eye-opener for us. We had a strong lesson, a hard lesson to take in terms of the market cost for event space in the Twin Cities. We had looked at several brew pubs like Surly Beer. We thought, wouldn't that be a fun environment to have a sale in? And I believe they were at $6,000 or $7,000 a day, something like that. Then I had thought, I know the International Market Square building very well. Great atmosphere it would be for this sale, and how cool to attract interior designers. Well, that was $15,000 minimum dollar commitment, including food and beverage. So said, this is like way out of our price range. So this is a gorgeous space, 500 square feet larger than the Northrop King building. Light filled, it's very uplifting, and centrally located at the state fairgrounds, parking right outside the door, and very accessible. So this is just to illustrate to you guys how we went about making these decisions. Next is we looked at our demographic, our market demographic, and we started with who has our customer been? Who have we relied on all these years for successful sales? Our members, friends and family, and those who are 50 or older or retired. And I would say a lot of it truly has been 65 or over. You know, and I kind of think about myself, maybe I should be thinking about coloring my hair one of these fun colors, because I don't consider myself a dull old person, just I'm an older person. So we said, if that's what we've been catering to by the type of marketing we've been doing, that's what it says about us. So what do we want? And we had, again, just a myriad of comments from all of you about, we need a broader market. You need to market more. Well, the question is, marketing to who? We need to bring younger people in. So we've got some younger people illustrated here. What would it take to bring this group in? What could we be weaving or spinning or dyeing that would appeal to that group? I don't necessarily have answers, but it's a great question for each one of us to think about as we think about putting this sale on. Next, we know that whoever comes in there has to have disposable income enough to afford the fairly priced artisan-made goods. And the example I use here is when I was with the New Mexico Guild. I think most of us know we charge around $28, $30, $32 for hand-woven towels, depending upon the fiber that's been used. In New Mexico, I was told my towels were way overpriced, that they needed to be $16 to $18 per towel. That's because that's all the market would bear. And that's not why we're trying to do this. We're trying to get a little income into each other's pockets and make this a bit of a win for the Guild as well. And I think we need, we thought as a group that we need a little more diversity here. We're all pretty Scandinavian. I am one who's the product of a mixed marriage, Norwegian and Swedish. But we need some ethnic diversity here. There are weavers all over this globe, and many of whom have small groups in the Twin Cities. We need to be bringing those guys in. And then finally, how cool would it be to have interior designers as customers, looking to us to be able to source very unique fabrics, if we could get them there and they could see our works. So then we had to say, okay, what are the values of these markets? What do they value? How do we market to them? Well, they love the handmade and high quality, no longer disposable stuff, unique, and the story. There's nothing that sells goods these days like the story behind it, which is why the meet your maker at the markets these days is so popular. How do we market to these folks? Very visual. Lots and lots of photos, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. It's all about social media. And you can read some of the rest of this as well. But our objective is to be able to bring along our historical customer base and expand into this target demographic. So Katie Oberton is in charge of our marketing effort. So these are the things that she and her team will be working on for us. Now, revising the categories of goods that we sell. I've alluded to this before, too much to adequately display. One other unintended consequence of this is it led to a number of requests by members to bring their own fixtures and have their own space so that they could control how their goods were being exhibited. And you know, if we change what we're going to accept, we have some tough decisions to make. What are we not going to accept? How would we say no to a member whose some of their items no longer works in the sale? That's not easy. We had debates for several months over this. We also took a look then at some historical sales comparisons to see by category if that could inform us at all of what would happen with us changing the categories. So we took sales by year, the total sales, the quantity of items were sold versus the quantity that were offered for sale, which was sometimes kind of eye-opening. Because in 2018, we were only able to sell 30% of what was offered, less than 30% actually. The best year we had was in 2009, where we sold 55% of what was offered for sale. We also noticed we had a problem here with yarn. I can remember, and I think many of you can, the years where we had a ton of hand spun and hand dyed yarn, but that has been decreasing significantly in the last few years because I think it's 2 of our makers have stopped making and don't have anything to show these days. So that led us to say we need to go out and recruit. I mean, to tell you, there are hand spinners all over this state. We ought to be able to get some folks in to exhibit part of who we are. Overdyed has been pretty popular several years ago, and this was in 2015, as 6% of the total sales in 2015, sorry, but only 2% in 2018. So, you know, trends come and go. It just wasn't as popular. So this helped inform us about where we were in terms of the categories. And just for a note, it's 2001 through 2012, we were at the Textile Center, and then 13 through 18 at Northrop King. So the actual categories then for the sale, we have over 50 of them. I'll show you an example in just a second. It's hand woven items, it's hand spun yarn, hand dyed fiber, and clothing can be hand dyed as well. Here's probably the major one that I've had the most feedback on thus far, is knitted and crocheted items only if they are made from hand spun or hand dyed yarns. Now, recognizing that sometimes commercial yarns are required in knitted or crocheted items, at least for structure. And so we have a test for acceptance. It's got to be at least 50 to 75% hand spun, or hand dyed. So this slide and the next actually list the type groupings like hand woven. And we're saying on any type of loom, any type of fiber. Plastic is fine. Is it kitchen or tabletop? Is it yardage? Is it other woven examples? And this complete list of categories will be on the WGM website as well. Hand spun, hand dyed, and we look at knit and crochet. You know, it's garments, mittens, hats, afghans. These are the most popular things that came in the knit and crochet categories over the last several years. Hand dyed. So the complete list, and there is actually a third page, but the complete list, we will require that when we have goods coming into the sale, that we, go back here, sorry, that these are the categories that we're using. You'll notice when you look at the whole list, there's no other, there's no miscellaneous. It needs to fit in these categories. So that's a lot. It's a lot of changes. So I'm going to pause here for questions you might have.
Thank you, Kathy. Barbie Russo broke the ice. She has a question from earlier in the presentation about online selling. She asks, could we set up a photo booth with good lighting so people could represent their goods well?
Sorry, I missed part of that. A photo booth with what?
A photo booth with good lighting so people can represent their goods well. And this would be, this would be for online sales, to assist sellers for online sales.
Okay. And actually, we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. It's a great question. Thank you for that.
Is there anybody else that has a question?
Okay, I'm going to move right along then. All right, some other things that we are working on and some other changes that we've made. Merchandise displays. We are making some changes. Now we do have an additional 500 square feet in this venue. We're replacing some of the fixtures that no longer really serve us well. But it's really important to note, we will continue to have a space problem if the volume of goods stays constant. Now, by eliminating some of the smaller items and the repurposed items, we gain back, I'm going to guess, 300 to 500 square feet of space. But what we're going to do to make sure that work is displayed well from a sales perspective is we'll hold back overstock. So for instance, you might bring in a set of 5 towels that are all exactly the same. So we might put one towel out, and the moment it sells, we have to get another one from under the table or from the back stock, which is exactly what retail stores do all the time. Or somebody will ask, have you got any more of these? Well, let me check. Fee structure is changing. We are going from $20 to $40 as the entrance fee for returning artists and $0 to $20 for first-time artists. We took a look at what the standard marketplace rates were, and I can tell you what I've paid in shows that I've gone and brought my own booth to is usually $300 to $400 for a day. Bringing my own booth, and in some cases, a percentage of the sales still goes back to whomever is putting the marketplace on. So we are a heck of a bargain, especially in the Twin Cities. So while this entry fee helps us cover marketing and space rental and fixtures and moving expenses, because we're all of a certain age and we are not picking up those heavy fixtures and moving them ourselves anymore. The the $20 didn't cover that. And right now we're assuming the risk, the guild is assuming the risk in holding the sale in terms of insurance and break even and not having to pay for expenses that the fees don't cover. And we want to make as much money back for you as the member exhibitors as possible. Next thing is, and we had quite a number of comments on this in the 23 plus pages, is if we're going to compete with the other marketplaces out there, we need some excitement, guys. We need some ambiance. And this new location, I think, is going to provide us with a great, great opportunity to do that. We need music. We need streaming video. We're going to get videos of some of you guys actually practicing your craft. There's a huge wide screen on one wall in that space meant for exactly that. We're looking at the possibility of food trucks. You know, so I can, and if the weather's nice, it's a great pavilion and seating area out front for us to move, for instance, move the demonstrations out there. So we want to create some pizzazz and some buzz about this new artisan sale, plied, dyed, and woven. Now, here comes the part where we solicit donations, right? We need volunteers. The only way this gets done is with you and me, the rest of the people on this call, and others who weren't able to make it tonight. We need volunteers right now. We have a number of committee leaders in place. I think most of them are actually on this committee or have been members of and working on the artisan sale for a number of years. Madeline, I welcome you. Is it Madeline or Madeleine? I welcome you as volunteer coordinator most recently. But here's what we need. Critical is a co-chair. I am technically a co-chair, but have been chairing the committee. I can't do this without a co-chair. The guild cannot have a single chairperson for this. There's way too much work. So what we've said is this event cannot be held without two people acting as co-chair. And what we want to do is the same thing that the guild does with the president. The president's role is there is always a, the vice president is intended to come up into the president's role the following year. That rotation has been going on for a number of years and works really well. That's what we need to be doing with this event because it's too huge. We need somebody for registration, somebody for check-in and check-out, the artist sales goods, that whole process start to finish. Coordination of the cashiers and the sales checkout desk. That includes all the registers and the credit card processing. Technology and electronics and hospitality. These more descriptions in much more detail are actually on the Weavers Guild website as well. And the things that are still on our plate to address, we've talked about a preview night. I know we've done that before. When I was still very actively involved in the sale and we had it at the Textile Center, we had a preview night, which was very successful. We're talking about adding a small juried exhibition similar to what HTA does with their small expressions. We do not, do not, have any intention of making this a juried event. We've had the request, obviously, to have a blended format, to have some artists have their own goods, their own booth where they staff it for the entire show. That's something we just could not get into with all the other changes that we're making this year. We're looking at possibly updating the inventory and sales process with software and much smaller tags. We want to work on interior designers as part of the target market, and we want to do some meet the artist stuff. So there's a lot more opportunity for what we do with this event. And at that point, that is everything that we have for the in-person sales events or the in-person events, remember we won't be having one this fall, sadly, but we are planning one next spring and next fall in 2021. So with that, are there any other questions?
We don't have other questions in the chat right now.
Okay.
But we'll have another opportunity coming up. Mm-hmm.
Yep, I've got about 3 more slides to go through here, where we started looking at online sales options. So we began talking about this as a possibility at the time that we realized we had to have a go, no-go decision date because of what was going on with COVID-19. So we've been considering 3 options, which are the most popular options out there in the ether today. One is the individual member site, where you're responsible for everything. It's your own site. I have one of those. I know a number of artists within the guild that have their own seller sites, where you're responsible for everything. The next most popular tends to be the Etsy style landing page, where you just go to Etsy and Etsy passes you through to an individual seller's site based upon doing some searches. If you were looking for hand woven goods, any one of the Etsy members that does hand woven goods would come up in your sale and you go directly to their website. The one that seems most attractive right now, for a variety of reasons, is the Amazon style marketplace, which would be operated by the guild. And what that is, it's a hybrid of the individual seller and the Etsy structure, where your goods as a member are hosted on the guild's website. So think about Amazon, excuse me. If you go to buy a book, you often can find both new and used versions of a given book. And if you select used, you're actually interacting with someone else in Amazon's marketplace. There's a guy here in Brainerd, 2 of them, that make their livelihood reselling books on Amazon. And they are sellers that ship you the book, and you're kind of none the wiser. So what that really means is it works like this. These are the responsibilities of the guild or the marketplace. These become the responsibilities of you, the member or the seller. And I will go through these in detail. The landing site or the portal, the website you go to, is something that has to be created by the guild. Has to be, and the guild also has to maintain that site. And think about what maintaining it means. It means every time you have a new item you want to sell, we have to get the photograph up there. We have to get the text that supports it, the pricing and all of that up there. That's maintenance. We would have to provide, we the guild, provide a standard template for you to use for your photographs and for your text describing your items so that it all looks the same item to item. We'd have to be displaying the inventory you have for sale along with your selling prices. Now here's some of the things that if you had your own website, these are things you would be responsible for. Here the guild handles all the payments from customers, handles the Minnesota state sales tax and the community sales tax, if there is one, county, and the annual filing with the state of retail sales and payment of sales taxes that have been collected. And then pays the sellers the purchase price less what we've agreed the commission would be in a selling environment like this. Now you as the seller would have to agree to the marketplace terms and conditions, including how we're paid as members or sellers. It's your own product photos and your own descriptions. And hold on, I'll answer that photo question in just a second. It's up to you what you're pricing your goods at. I've been looking at some of the other guilds and what they're doing now as a result of COVID with their online sales. And I'm seeing pricing in there at $50 per towel, which is above what we've been generally charging for our work. But they're clearly selling them at that price. Updating inventory immediately. Now, in my case, I have some things that I do sell in other locations and online, which means the moment something sells at one of those other locations, I'm going to have to update the inventory that's available in the guild site. That's on me. And then packing and shipping, you would be responsible for. Now, I will say we are, Celeste, you might want to put your fingers in your ears, and anybody else who's on the board. What this group is considering is this could be part of building the guild for the future. I mean, what if our books and all of our fibers, used items that are at the guild, could also be online available for sale? What if? What if we could have, on an ongoing basis, online sellers? There is a guild that does that out east. And as they're doing this outside of COVID-19, they are allotting each member the ability to put 3 items online. One of those items sells and you can replace that with another item. So it doesn't have to be as grandiose and as complicated as it would be when we're trying to replace the in-person sale for a year. So this is a huge heavy lift if we want to pull this off by October. I do know a little bit about it since I was the one who was the program manager for Best Buy when we put up their marketplace. So I know how it works. That doesn't mean I know how to build a website. That's not me. It requires some deep expertise. So we would be looking to somebody in the guild to take that on or to supervise it. We also remember this is going to require ongoing technical support whenever that site is up, including customers calling, saying, the inventory button isn't working. I can't put this in my cart. Why not? Building the standard templates, assembling and editing the photos, which is a huge job. But we do have, for this sale, if we're able to pull this off this year, starting in October, we do have the possibility of a couple of guild volunteers initially doing all the photography. So it will all be professional photography. It will look fabulous, and all the packing and shipping. So it would take a great deal of the burden off of the sellers for this initial foray at it. Still requires rapid updates on the inventory. So the committee is meeting, the committee right now meets every other week. Our next meeting is July 15th, where we will be taking a deeper dive look at it and to say, is there purchase? There are a number of different software companies out there that have software that does exactly this, marketplace software, with various level of costs, but it still requires the person who knows what he or she is doing with this to pull it all together. So if anybody knows of an individual like that with that kind of skill set, please contact the guild or contact me directly. And with that, call that a wrap with whatever questions you might have.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. We have a suggestion from Barb who says, what about recruiting people to do demos, video for online sales, and video or in person for a live sale from among people that have signed up to do demos at the state fair in the past? And Kathy, if you'd like, I can respond to that. from working with the outreach committee?
That would be fabulous. Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, Barb, that is a great suggestion. Right now, the outreach committee is on board to help support the Artisan Sale with on-site demos, as well as having artists on hand to be able to engage people who are within the space and looking at goods. Those folks would be able to share and speak about the process of creating a hand-woven towel or a rug. And kind of highlight the differences, talk about the equipment as a sort of one-to-one complement to demonstrators. And for sure, we will be reaching out to volunteers who have demonstrated at the state fair, as well as people who have volunteered at other events. Additionally, we recently launched a program called Studio Tours, where we are inviting members to send in photographs of their studio and answer some questions about their process and space. And that is a format that we could, pretty quickly or easily pivot and use, for recording demonstrations or sharing out on process for an online sale, or even as marketing material before an in-person sale. So I think your comment is really insightful and also quite helpful. We have a question from Shannon Gupta. Would the buyers be charged a shipping fee, or would we need to include that in the price for online sales?
Great question. We haven't gotten that far yet. But I will say that every online sale I have dealt with, I have always charged shipping. People on Etsy always charge shipping. But we have not crossed that bridge yet with the committee. Great question.
Thank you, Kathy. Stay tuned. Barb has another question. Since we'd be starting from scratch with an online marketplace, it would be good to make sure any product used, plus descriptions of goods, are fully accessible for users with limited vision. So making sure that our online marketplace is accessible to a variety of users. And Kathy, I can speak to this one as well, since we've been
I was just going to say, are you talking about hearing impaired, sight impaired?
Barb mentions specifically users with limited vision. And we have been doing some accessibility updates to our website to make it easier to navigate for those with limited vision. And I imagine that something that will need to be considered as part of an online marketplace is helping people to write visual descriptions that can be attached to their images, so that those with low vision can still have a sense of what they are purchasing, or what is being represented online.
Yeah, I can absolutely understand that, because traditionally everyone who comes into our sale needs to touch it and feel it. After all, that's the weaver's handshake. Can I touch that? Yeah, I get that. Great observation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy, and a really fantastic suggestion, Bart. And from Celeste, we have a question. When lack of volunteers was identified, was the problem lack of demonstrators? That wasn't my experience, having done both. Those jobs get grabbed fast.
I don't think it's ever been a lack of demonstrators. It's always been difficult to find people to work the sales floor. That's the least desirable job. There are a number of things that people can do ahead of time, like working on marketing is a great example. Or if we're doing an online sale, it's working on the photography, working on the copy, the descriptions for the items, all kinds of things ahead of time. But the most difficult one, and Brenda, I know you can speak to this as well, and I think Madeline Schinbach is probably on. That's probably the most difficult thing. Let me see if I can. I don't know, I can't unmute you. Betsy, can you unmute Brenda?
Yeah, let me see. I'm trying to find her in our list. Okay.
I'm here, Kathy.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're asking about which are the most difficult volunteers to get.
Yes, I am.
Cashiers is probably a critical volunteer position. And we frequently have difficulty finding people to do that. And also after the sale is done and everybody goes home, all that stuff has to be put back away. and the chairs got stuck doing it in 2018, the last time we had this sale.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. Yeah, it's not all fun and glamour. There's a lot of dirt and sweat that goes with it.
Great. Are there any other questions that people have? We can give it another moment to see if anything pops up in the chat.
Meanwhile, I'll say thanks so much for your participation tonight. As Betsy mentioned, this has been recorded, so it will be available online, as will the slide deck. And the list of sales categories is online on the Guild website as well. And if you haven't noticed, there is a communication every time the draft is published about the latest and greatest that's going on with the artisan sale. So pay attention there too. All right, Betsy, anything else?
Nothing else. One comment from Brenda. Thank you, Kathy. Great job. And Celeste said, beautiful job, beautiful slides. And I echo that as well. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done on this, as well as Karin Knutson, our staff member, who's also done a heavy lift. So, and then the larger team revisioning the artisan sale. Yep. And hopefully I'll have this edited and up online by tomorrow.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.